Hello and welcome to E-commerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today's title is How to Cut Your Google Ad Spend by a Third or More. As ever, I'm joined by Dr. Rob Horton, who, as I haven't seen him in the flesh in 6+ months, I should probably now refer to him as my pen pal, but hey ho, maybe we'll get to see each other in person before Christmas this year. I'm Philip Huthwaite, the founder of BlackCurve, and without further ado, here we go.
I think that's my favourite one yet. We just write little notes to each other in Jira. That's what we do now.
At Rob. At Philip, have you done this? It's normally, have you done this? To be fair, that's normally the thing, backwards and forwards. So shall we go straight into it? So today's title is How to Cut Your Google Ad Spend by a Third or More. And so what lovely prop have you bought today to represent today's title?
Well, mine is a bit of a reach because we've recorded two in quite close succession, so I'm still in Devon and I still haven't properly moved in. But I have a domino set.
Oh,
so the what we'll talk about it later, but how a small change at one end can have a massive knock on all the way down to the other. I told you it was a reach.
I like it. I'm not sure if I now want to show you what I've got.
Is it a domino set?
It's a domino set. It's a lovely wooden... No. So I'll show you what I've got. I do like it. I like that. You see, you're the doctor for a reason, aren't you?
The lateral thinking.
Again, I have gone really, really literal. And also, once again, there's a theme in my presence as well. My props as well. I've nicked it from my child. So here we go. Here we go. So I've got
very apropos.
I've got a whole market trading stall because, that's where it all began. And then came the internet and now we are. So that's basically what I've gone with.
I like yours. Everybody. I don't have that reach. So I was also taking things from a child, except it was me as a child.
Because you're back home again, aren't you? So,
yeah.
So if
I
I
went
get
into my room and looked at the shelf, like what can I've got books, comics, something here must be in some way relevant.
I'm just impressed your parents haven't changed your bedroom into a gym or a spa or something.
My jobs while I'm down here is to clean the shit out.
Well, if I get peckish at any point in this podcast, I can just have a plastic fruit. So today,
classic. Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
I'm definitely going to have to make sure that next week I up my brain game on props. So, but hey ho. So we've got a market stall and some dominoes. So shall we go straight into it? Where would you like to start in terms of how to cut your Google ad spend? I mean, do you think it's worth us sort of setting the scene? And we're primarily going to be talking about how you can use pricing to cut your Google ad spend. Is that right, Rob?
Yeah, it's worth saying up front that we are not. This is what we've seen from the pricing side. We're not ad optimization experts. We understand a bit of the ecosystem, but if we get something wrong, let us know. It's likely. We're just talking about what we've seen working with our clients and the knock-on effects of pricing on that. It's probably worth, and it's also worth mentioning that when we say this, we're talking primarily about the Google shopping and Google marketplace kind of ecosystem, because that's where we sit in, and I think is probably the primary advertising area. I mean, obviously there's Facebook and Amazon and all the rest of it, but for us, we're Google centric in terms of what we do. So that's where we'll be talking about, really.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certainly two sides to your Google ad marketing ecosystem, right? So you've got the physical ability to, on the search side, right, to buy keywords and also buy the ad slots, okay, but also buy your position in the results as well. But I think the one that the pricing has the greatest influence on is actually in the Google shopping space, right? Mm-hmm. So it's again in terms of, you're bidding on certain keyword terms, you're bidding on position, but it's the impact of the pricing decision that you make through time on that ad spend, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because we optimize at a product level, so it makes sense that the biggest impact is or the most noticeable impact that we see is at a per product level. Or that's because that's what we're looking for in a sense, right?
So how does Google? How can you optimize your Google ad spend? What are some of the things that you've seen our customers do?
Yeah, it's a good place to start. So let's talk. We're just going to talk about products here on the shopping feed. I think there's a lot of general stuff that applies in terms of keyword optimization, making sure you're not general negative search terms, blah blah blah. A whole like lots of blogs that I would just be regurgitating and not really helping with. The from a pricing perspective, there are actually two main ways. Firstly is that three actually. The firstly is that data quality, which is something we always go on about, is key. Things like whether you've got GTINs or unique product identifiers, you need all this stuff for your search feed anyway. Because the way, as I understand it, the way Google works is that you upload your product feed, and then that ties in with your advertising account, and then you do that. So you need good quality, correct data to match. So Google can match right across other products and put you in the right place and make sure you're doing the right thing. The classic thing is this optimizing the terms themselves. So you may want to go for more specific terms rather than more general ones. And the other thing you can do is kind of put different strategies for different buckets or labels in your product set. So you group your products differently. So you may want to treat top selling products differently to low selling products in terms of ad spend, because the ROI on some products will be much higher for that advertising investment than others. And if you work with someone, a lot of people work with agencies to manage this. They don't do this in-house. I think that's worth saying. So we'll also talk about some things that you can do that you don't need the agency to do or interact with, and it'll just happen, which I think is probably the most interesting thing for a lot of people. But also, if you have a very good agency, they will be doing it at the per product level as well. So they will be looking and even actually further down to the per customer level or per transaction level, I should say. So it really, really drilling right down and trying to maximize profitability from an individual customer rather than anything else. So the short answer is there's a lot.
I mean, I'm gonna start by your first point there in terms of data quality, and this is quite an interesting one. So we've found that, so obviously it depends on the structure of company to company, but especially if you're using an outsourced entity to manage your marketing, sometimes as well in the actual company you have a marketing manager or a digital marketer or whichever kind of whichever title they come under, and that individual is not always involved in the pricing decision process, right? Okay, because sometimes that might sit with sometimes the top dog, or sometimes with a commercial person, or sometimes with an e-commerce director, or there's lots of titles. I'll stop playing title bingo. But what I'm trying to say is that sometimes simple things like making sure you've got your cost prices correct, or making sure you have cost prices, right? Or making sure that you've got your RRPs set, you've got your minimum prices, those kind of things. Okay, yeah, that doesn't get as much scrutiny always when you're working with when it's just the marketers going about their optimizing business. And what we've certainly found that when we're doing the pricing decisions exercise, if your data's not as good, that's when they invest the time in making sure that those cost prices are correct. So if you're making bidding decisions and you haven't, sort of a byproduct of doing a pricing project is getting your data health sorted, and that in itself can go go massively far towards you making sure that you actually have your margins correct, you're actually bidding at the right level, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really worth stressing. And it's so if you're working with an agency, their goal is the same as our goal as a pricing institute, pricing company. It's profit optimization, right? You're using a vector to try and get the most bang for your buck, and they will be looking at whether algorithmically or just by hand. They will be looking at the data that comes in, because that data lets them build a strategy out. So, for example, like you say, if your pricing data and your sales data is not correct, so if your cost prices are wrong, so your margins are wrong, or your transactional data is missing or coming from the wrong sources. A classic example is people often aggregate in-store and web sales data, which is really problematic, because one of those is driven by the marketing online, and one of them is more nebulous. Some of it might be people might have seen it online and gone to the store, but it's much harder to trace, right? And so this then damages the marketing agency's ability to kind of calculate a fair price, or in the auction, or work out exactly how much they're willing to go up to in a bid, or based on the ROI calc. And it's exactly the same data that we need. So there's a very virtuous circle there between pricing and marketing, just on that data piece alone. And I think I'm a data guy, right? But quite honestly, that story is true no matter what operational thing you do in your business. But if your data isn't good, you can be as data driven as you want, but your conclusions will be nonsense. Or how do we say it professionally? There'll be a wide margin for error on it, but garbage in, garbage out, right?
It's like deja vu going back to episode 1 of this this podcast. I think, what are we on, 20 something now? So that takes us back. Yeah, and it's important to say that if you do have an agency already, they're probably doing a lot of fantastic work to optimize your spend. I mean, you've touched upon, for example, bidding for generic terms versus specific terms. More than likely they would have done tests to bid for, I don't know, Dyson Hoover as opposed to Dyson Animal XCT 7000, right? Okay, yeah, I don't know why I did a robotic voice, but it just seemed appropriate. Okay,
is that what I sound like to you?
No, that was a general robot.
That was a generic nerd voice. I know that voice.
That's how you sound to yourself in your head. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's important to add. But the next piece that I'd like to pick your brains on, Rob, is that how, let's assume that, the third party marketing agency, or even the person managing it in-house, whoever that might be, is going to be optimizing, bidding for certain terms, setting caps for things. But the competitor data piece dovetailed into that normal business as usual optimization piece can be transformational. And this can be actually one of the levers that you can use to reduce your ad spend, right?
So I think this is probably the biggest bang for buck in terms of easiest thing you can do. And it all comes down to what we said at the beginning, is that price is being competitive in price is a key factor in the Google algorithm, Google ad spend algorithm. No one knows quite the back end. We've spoken to agencies who obviously know a lot more about this than we do, and they know it's important, but again, they can't quantify how much. And quite simply, by being competitive in your pricing, it means that you often have to spend less on advertising, because one of the variables, basically you've increased a different variable in that Google algorithm in your favor, and that has meant that you have less you've got to push less on the other ones, basically. Now, the interesting thing there is like whether you save the money or reinvest it or double down or whatever. I mean, that's I don't. That's not something I can really answer because that's more for the people involved actually in the advertising. But what it does mean is that you're certainly being more efficient in your budget, and all you have to do is plug a repricer in. So if you've got if an agency say runs all your advertising spend, this will work without having to interact with that agency at all. So you use a repricer, you become market competitive. Back to the dominoes, this has the knock-on effect of actually making the agency's job quote unquote easier downstream. There are some nuances in that if people are if the agency is doing actual optimization kind of algorithmically, there is a risk that often uncompetitive products are too expensive, have a higher margin. They'll be using that in that optimization calculation. As that margin comes down, their ROI calc changes. So you do have to make sure that this is all a bit joined up. But that is the kind of, if I'm honest, the super competitive, not competitive, wrong word, super kind of market leading agency viewpoint on this stuff. And for most people, that isn't the reality because, like you said, a lot of it is around optimizing at the search term level rather than at the individual kind of AI calculation of bid process.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just important to stress that I think there is a fine balance between just simply plugging in a repricer and hoping that's going to cut your costs by a third. I think in the industries which are uber branded, uber kind of the products that are available in lots of different outlets, these are the ones that are normally it's easy to find an alternative. It's easy to find the same product at many vendors. Therefore, it dictates that these are generally price competitive. Or rather, you have to be competitive on them, right? Where there are maybe fewer vendors, it's about identifying which ones you have to be competitive on, or working with a repricer that enables you to identify which ones you need to be competitive on, so you don't undersell yourself. And that exercise as well goes into the optimization piece of your spend. I mean, I think, if you're looking at it from purely, I mean, hey, different sectors. This is not meant to be a lockdown podcast, but different sectors have performed well, and different other sectors have been harder hit in certainly the online space at the moment. So if you're looking to cut your costs by a third, for the sake of 2, 3, 4, 500 quid, spending 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 grand for a very small retailer a month on Google ad spend is quite common. So, for 500 quid to save a third on 10 grand, that's pretty reasonable return. But then to come back to what you said earlier, I don't play roulette, so I'm not a case of if you win on red, you double down your winnings and go again. Although I'm sure somebody has done many a mathematical formula as to what you should do in different scenarios. But to come back to
not just don't play roulette.
Yeah, don't play roulette. So it's complete.
The zero breaks the game. You lose on average.
Okay,
don't play roulette.
But my point being is that me being a business owner, from my perspective, if something is working, if I've managed to save, and it's about working out where I spend on the Google space that really drives traffic and drives conversion, I would probably look to try and take that third that I saved and double down on where it is working. And that for me is a successful marketing operation. It's using your budget to its full disposal. Because I mean, I also regularly get. I mean, we're a different kind of structure of business because for those who don't know, we are venture backed. So debt is our friend. But I win no prizes. I win no prizes each year if I haven't spent my budget. It's kind of you've laid out your budget, you've made your educated decisions at the beginning of the quarter. So I think that it's just working out what the best thing is to do for your business.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think what I would say, just anecdotally, is that if you are making a change to your pricing, it is definitely worth having a conversation with whoever's doing the whether it's agency or in-house, whoever's running your marketing, because it will have a knock-on effect. Because the other thing is you want what. So I'm really interested in digital marketing because I think it's really scientific, right? It's very done well. It's test, measure. And so if you're making this fundamental change at the back end, you don't want that to be misappropriated or misunderstood in that because suddenly say the amount you have to spend drops by a third on probably on certain products rather than others. You need to understand why in your strategy, because you don't want to think, oh well, that's great, the market's just got cheaper, maybe someone's dropped out of it, I'll just spend in the same way, or carry on, and that might work, but that won't be an optimal way of doing it. And I guess this kind of segues into the next bit, is that the interesting thing from a pricing perspective is that we understand competition differently from a marketing perspective, and that's kind of like the second layer to this. So the first thing is just like by being quote unquote price competitive, you have a knock-on effect in Google's algorithms, and happy days, and off you go. The second part is there's the optimization piece around this, and there are products that you will never be able to be truly price competitive on. And what that means really is that you will never be able to go down enough to make the margin you need to make those products sustainable for you in a business. And so then you've got a question from a pricing side, sure, do I stop? You've got a question from the stock side, and you've got a question from the marketing side in terms of, well, if these are never going to be price competitive, am I always going to be fighting uphill on them? Or is actually, can I win the battle with demand? And again, this is where we can't answer the question for you, but you have this kind of go, no go decision where it's either like, well, actually, I can dominate the market through advertising. So that's your classic, your kind of classic bombard every media channel, spend a load of money. This is build up brand association. So while we're more expensive, people just associate it, build that quality thing, or whatever. Like, well, these are the market leaders, so although they cost more, I'm going to buy this for other than that. iPhone versus Android, I guess, would be quite a good example of that, in that apart from the fact that they're not really like for like products comparisons, but you get what I'm saying. Well, the other side of it is that, like, okay, do we just stop spending money, right? Like, or do we move the bucket that this isn't? Oh, we thought this was an all right seller, but actually it's not the price that's having an impact, it's not the marketing that's having an impact. So let's just not double down and save money there. And it's this kind of competitive bucketing, I think, layered with your sales data, what's doing well, and the rest of it, and then layered with the competitive view that you get from the marketplace in terms of ad spend and who is getting things in front of people's faces. That's the next stage of making this really powerful. And I think the pricing bit is often missing from that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the last sort of 5 or so customers that we've brought on, when we've had the conversation with them about how do they manage their marketing activities, I think four out of the 5 actually outsource it. That a lot of the time they're using, when they're outsourcing it, they're using the Google. Well, it's a bit of a I won't get too much into if you can manage both sides of the coin, if you can influence people's decisions of how much they spend with you, that's the holy grail, right? Which is to a certain extent what the Google ad ecosystem does. But they literally throw up all their products into the system, or all the products that they want Google to manage, or through to Google to manage, and then Google does its thing, because you can let it auto run within kind of boundaries. But if I'm right, Rob, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, the next stage of optimization is bucketing, right, and putting your products into certain categories. And one of them might be, it might just be that you don't have to have loads of competitors for a certain product to want to bid for it on Google Shopping, right? But it might be that you have changed the price of this product loads and loads of times historically, and it hasn't had any influence on
Mhm.
on sales. So therefore, is it worth putting money behind it on Google Shopping? I mean, it might be worth doing a test on that to see if that does drive it. But then if that's not influencing it, get a mechanism that allows you to bucket it, like BlackCurve or alternative. Get a mechanism that allows you to bucket it, that says, don't bid on this.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in on that to make so. Um, Most people will let Google handle the bid side of it, and what Google acts as the broker, in effect, which makes sense. I don't think either of us is saying let us do that, because we've got no idea. What you can do, and what is often most agencies will do as a first step, is to build out different strategies for different sets of your products. I think they're called labels. But you basically tag stuff, and you say, well, this is a product, this is a B product, this is a C product. I have strategy A, strategy B, strategy C, right? That's simple. You build the different strategies out about how aggressive you want to be, what's your maximum spend or whatever. And this is where we can help, right? This is where, by giving you those more insight into kind of how you should break those strategies out. And I would say that it's not going to be just like, here's a label from BlackCurve. It's here is some things that BlackCurve have thrown out as uncompetitive, or it's actually things like it's not price driven. That kind of stuff, price elastic, combined with the marketing view and also the stock view, right? Because you've got to be able to get enough stock in to balance that, because really the people in non-cyclical business don't like it when I use the term sell-through, but like, there is a rate at which you can get and ship stock, and that has a limit, and you're optimizing profitability through that process in effect, right? So if I can get if I can only sell one product every 6 months, because that's how long it takes. I'd say I'm making furniture. I'm in Devon. Why not? It takes me 6 months to build something. I basically need to maximize the price on that product, because it's going to take me 6 months to build the next one. But fortunately, I own the market, so I can do whatever. Whereas when it becomes more competitive, there's a price I want to go down to, but I can often be a bit more expensive if I'm limited by the amount of stock I'm shifting. So this is kind of where we get into that. It's not just pricing, it's not just marketing, it's stock as well. And you want to get all this stuff singing together, and that's what should dictate your strategy. It's this overarching view, not just price competitive or no sales or whatever. I will say that just doing that will probably help, actually, even if you do the non-selling price competitive, non-selling non-price competitive, well-selling super price competitive. That's probably a good 2 buckets to start with, just from data that we kind of have. But obviously, the more data you can layer in, the better the view you'll get.
Yeah, and then right at the other end of the spectrum, well, it might not be right at the other end of the spectrum, but it's certainly a few steps away from what you've described, is that if you can use your pricing, you can rapidly test and work out which prices you need to be sensitive to the market on, or where you don't need to be the cheapest. Okay, that then also supports that you have brand power in that particular instance. So therefore, you don't need to bid to be position 1 on Google Shopping, right? You can get away with being position 4, for example, position 5, and that in itself is powerful, and that in itself goes to how you don't feed the Google machine, or you probably, as I said, you probably just go and reallocate that back into a different part of your Google ad spend. But there's lots of little you get by. There's so many knock-on effects of if you get your pricing correct.
I think if it was me, that I really like, because I like independent variables, not dependent variables. So I would be looking initially to work out which products are majority price driven and which majority advertising not driven, PPC driven, or like Google Shopping driven, because those buckets you basically can exclude. I mean, obviously there's going to be a base level of both, but because when we say things are on advertising driven, what it we mean is that we have to pay enough to get it in front of people's eyeballs, and in the same way that you, from the pricing side, you have to reprice often enough to be in a competitive range, because if people aren't looking at it, we used to work with somebody who described it quite well. It's like, all right, you can get me looking in the window, but the price isn't right, I'm not going to buy it, right? And conversely, it doesn't matter if the price is right if you've got a brick wall in front of the window. So you need that base level harmony between the two to be effective. And then within that, you can work out what needs to be at the front of the window or what you can stick at the back of the window. Basically, I think. Maybe stretch the metaphor.
No, because this then comes down to what do you classify, what are you tracking as a win, right? A win to me, I get cross when I'm looking at our own website stats and our own marketing spend stats, and it's like, oh, we've got all this traffic turning up to our website, and it's like vanity metrics. I mean, I get told off when I say things like this, but I want someone to buy. That's fundamentally, that is a conversion. Okay, so there's no point spending a ton of money on Google Shopping if they're coming to your website and not buying. So if you get your pricing right, they come to your shop window and they buy, okay, because you are competitive where you need to be, or they buy because you've invested in other areas to make your brand powerful, and then your pricing supports that strategy, or you've built enough trust to enable you to hit a different price point.
I think there's another interesting thing around this that is kind of the elephant in the room in this conversation at the minute, and quite an argument for automating both, is that stock is king at the minute, and given the supply chain issues with COVID, given the sudden surge in online shopping because of COVID, probably because of COVID, I guess in general, second lockdown, people are bored, people are buying stuff. Really, where we spoke about this last week, but the focus of most businesses is on stock and supply chain, and actually people have been uninvesting in advertising. I know some agencies have been hit quite hard, but really what you want to be doing is have the kind of relationship, same with pricing, where you can spin up and spin down. And this is the kind of, this comes back to the data purity, the automation, kind of getting everything together in harmony, because then you can put the resources into the bits that need it. So, okay, especially from a human perspective, okay, well, everyone is shifting boxes in the warehouse, or trying to sort out when the bloody container's coming in. Okay, well, the prices, we spoke about this last week, the pricing is doing something simple. We've turned down advertising spend because we can't get the stock in. Like, we're selling out of everything. I mean, that's my anecdotal experience at the minute, trying to find a birthday present for my partner. Like, do you want a pair of slippers? They're nowhere. Like, and I'm having to go to website, not in a bad way, but I'm finding shopping from websites I never would have shopped from before. Anecdotally, I can give you a little hint. So I've learned this from work. Find the GTIN, search for the GTIN. No lie, right? Pair of Birkenstock slippers, got the product code, Google Shopping, product code, found the product. Works.
Boom. There we go.
So if you're struggling, it works. Anyway, we'll do a Robin Phillips holiday shopping tips.
Well, I'm sure I've spoken about this in the past, but I'm going to say it anyway because it follows on from what you've said. I needed a duffel bag, a waterproof duffel bag, and I'm probably swayed by outdoor brands. I'm not a brand whore, but I got outdoor brands. I seem to have trust in certain outdoor brands. So it was North Face, right, and a duffel bag, and normally they're stupidly expensive, these bags, for what you get. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to do what you've just said. I'm gonna put the product code into Google Shopping, okay, and find it. And I found it from a supplier that I'd never shopped before, and it was about 40 quid cheaper. So I'm not saying like it's a massive, it was
Worth
100 quid bag, worth copy and pasting a GT in. And I would, even if I'd put like North Face duffel medium, I would not have found it. I just would not have found it. Okay, because clearly they weren't bidding on this particular term or weren't visible. So there we go. That's how the consumer can save money from Google Shopping, and we've also tackled how businesses can save money on the other side. So sorry, Google, that we're.
But people have. This is a bit of a tangent, but I do think it is an interesting one because it does tie into all of this. Because it's interesting as a consumer often how hard it is to find a product you want to buy that actually. I mean, why are we having to search for GTINs to find a product that's there? And it does come back to this advertising spend. I was talking to my dad about this last night because, unsurprisingly, we're buying some fishing kit, and we work with a fishing supplier who actually kicked off this whole conversation. A really really nice group of guys, but they never come up on Dad's shopping feed, and he's quite technical. He likes to understand, so he's trying to work out why. And I think they must not be targeting his demographic in somehow or something. I'm going to feed it back to the guys anyway, because they should be targeting this demographic because he drops an incredibly large amount of it. But
well, it's where because you're where you're based, Devon, right? So
yeah, exactly.
So they might not be bidding because of shipping or so forth. But actually, no, they're UK wide, so that is quite interesting.
Yeah, I just found that really.
Just give him your IP address from where you are, and he'll just bid. Go all in on that IP address, and then your poor father will be poorer. So
well, he's spending the money anyway.
So you might as well go to a friendly home.
This is the point. I'd rather someone that I'm horrifically country, but I'd rather someone I know and gets it than someone else. But like, I think this problem is. It got me thinking because this problem is not solved by any means. In that, like, it's really not optimized. You've got people who want to buy something, a specific product, and then you've got this Google advertising shopping engine where you're spending a lot of money, and there's a lot of lost sales knocking about because of the inefficiencies in that. And this is where a good agency will help you out in terms of building strategies around customer segmentation, and there is depth in the engine for doing that. But there's clearly, if my dad isn't finding a supplier that in theory ships there, we know they're competitively priced, and we know that their advertising guys are good as well. It's worth saying. There is clearly a huge amount of inefficiency in this system that could be optimized.
I suppose the human. It's getting into the head of the human of to what is your father actually putting into that Google Shopping search box?
Well, it's literally that. And the analog for me is that, like, in our world, is recruitment. So companies always complain they can't find good candidates, and good candidates can't always complain they can't find good companies. And there's there's always a breakdown in kind of the brokerage, in that, like, in that kind of recruitment brokering, linking people up, and I think there's something similar here in the fact that, like, Google is brokering this. But isn't understanding the human quite as well as maybe it should, in the or how the search terms you should be bidding on actually link up the buyer journey of the person doing it. And I think that's where the real interesting part is, the customer journey. It's like, how is the customer thinking, and how does that interface with my search terms? And so part of that obviously is price, which makes sense that price is a factor, but also how do you get the customer looking at what you're doing in the first place, and what's that journey? What are they searching for? Because they're the ones that are right, because they're the one that are buying. And like we've learned this in another life, in that you can try and convince people of something all you want, but if you're not solving the problem that they're looking to solve, you're not going to convert. And it's building that profile. Okay, so we'll do fishing, because I know fishing, but I'm looking a certain age, a certain background, usually do care about price, do care about quality, care about brand loyalty, that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, my whole business, my brand values of my business have to represent this. Because it could be that you're spending a load of money, but because your website looks a certain way, that people won't trust you, right? Is a really simple example. And I think it's building that holistic picture out, with pricing as part of that I find super interesting in this marketing space, because it's not just how much you're bidding here and the benefit that being price competitive has. It's understanding the client, the customer journey, and how that fits in, and then what you need to optimize and how much you need to optimize. Because if to kind of get that conversion, really. That makes sense. I feel like I've tangented a little bit, but
no, it does. It does indeed. It does indeed. So just coming up to the top of the hour, I'm going to call final orders on. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, Rob? Or do you think we've gone as far as we can in the time available?
No, I think it is worth reiterating that just being price competitive will have a huge impact, and being systematically price competitive will have a huge impact on your ad spend, without having to do anything fancy or anything clever. And we've seen that time and time
again. So, I mean, this third hasn't been made up, right? So this is based on the last 5 case studies that we've done, right? So it's if you don't do anything and you get your competitor, you get your competitive mix sorted, you work out where you need to be competitive, and then you iterate your prices in that has had a direct impact on the amount of money that those companies have had to invest in their Google shopping arena. Okay, hands down. Okay, and that's actually, that saving was seen within the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's out of the gate. So it's like an overnight thing, right? And then we've touched upon some other areas. Then you get into kind of the Sky or the Team Ineos, or I don't know if that team's been disbanded now. I've not kept up necessarily. But the incremental gains kind of philosophy, whereby the next stage is looking at bucketing your products, or labeling your products rather, to use Google's terminology of, this is a high seller, this is a low seller, this product is not influenced by price, so forth and so forth, and then using that data to influence your particular bidding strategy, and so forth. So
yeah, and I'd say that, like, in a kind of a time poor environment for many reasons, actually going back to what we said last week, that just automating simple kind of competitive repricing will save. It may not make you more money per product, but it will save you a lot of money per product, if that makes sense. In that, like, it's like the classic adage of there's 2 ways to increase margin, right? Sorry, 2 ways to increase profitability: increase your margin or reduce your cost. Like, then actually the automating the pricing process, however simply, really, right now will save you business operating costs and marketing operation costs. I can pretty much guarantee that.
And put a smile on that commercial and MD manager's face, because you thought your Google ad spend was going to be 10K plus a month, and it's a lot less. So I think
it's the same but more effective.
Or it's the same but more effective. But hey, it's win-win. It's win-win. It's win-win. Right. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We have been BlackCurve. This is our podcast. E-commerce Matters is available on all major shopping. Spotify. I've got my tongue-tied twist on all major podcasting platforms. I'm Philip Hathaway. I've been joined by Rob. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.